Hello there, kids, and welcome to the sophomore installment of Fact You, here with your good buddy, Uncle Ben. I'm hoping this is a sophomore effort like Van Halen 2 and not like, Human Clay by Creed. You guys left me a bunch of great questions and comments on the first installment of Fact You, so we're going to start getting into some of those today. But before we do, let's check out Uncle Ben's boombox and see what's playing. I may be destroying any shred of my metal credibility that's left, but this week I've been listening to a whole lot of Room for Squares by good old John Mayer. This record came out back in my college days, and I remember a whole bunch of my friends, like my buddy Josh, being totally all about it, just going nuts over it. And in the back of my head, being, Mr. Metal dude, I was like, oh, this is just, pop stuff. I really looked down on it. But then I sat down and listened to it, and I realized that the chord progressions and the melodies and the song structures and stuff going on that record are really hip, really sophisticated, and really awesome to listen to. The way I see it, John Mayer is the guy that made playing big, expensive chords in pop music cool again. Now, a lot of actually the 80s, like Hall & Oates and stuff like that, did that kind of thing on the regular. They'd be using these 13 chords and 11 chords and all this jazz. But then we kind of went through a phase where we didn't really have any of that in popular music until John Mayer started bringing it back. The whole record sounds ridiculous. It sounds like $1 million. The production on the record is astounding. The drums sound amazing. Vocal production is great. Guitar tones are amazing. Bass tone is awesome. It's really just a real sonic treat. But enough about Uncle John. Let's get down to some questions. First question today comes from two dudes. David Martinez, who asked this on a YouTube comment, and Josh Kennedank, who asked this on Instagram. They both wanted to know, what string gauge do you use and what brand of strings do you prefer the most? Well, chaps, I am myself a Diodario'sman. I'll give you guys a quick rundown on which strings I use on which guitars for which tunings and all that jazz. Keep in mind, pretty much all of my guitars are Fender scale, 25.5 inches. If I'm playing one of my RGs or my Surs, which is again 25.5 inches in standard tuning, I'm going to be using a standard 9 through 42 set. I've always played lighter gauge strings. I've gone back and forth. I used 10s for a couple of years there, and they're fine. There's a lot of people that get great sounds out of them, but I've always liked 9s. There's something about how snappy and kind of wiry they sound, kind of, jangly sounding. And I like how pliable they are for bends and vibrato and stuff. So yeah, 9 through 42 is kind of my standard gauge for standard tuning. I keep this beautiful blue RG550 tuned down a half step, and for that I use the 9.5 through 44 set. I find that feels pretty much like a set of 9s in standard tuning. I'm currently keeping the RG520 here tuned down a whole step, and for that I use the 10 through 46 pack. Now for my 7 strings, I again use a 9 through 42 set, but then from Diodario I also get individual 56 gauge low B strings, and I'll use those for B tuning or A tuning if I do like a drop A tuning. For my grandpa's guitars, I've really been enjoying the new Diodario nickel bronze strings. These are freaking awesome. I use the 11 through 52 set usually. Every now and then I've tried the lighter gauge, the 10 through 47, which is kind of nice because you can really get in there and bend them and stuff a little bit. These strings sound freaking fantastic, especially if you have an acoustic guitar with kind of a muddy low end on it. It's like they really clean up a lot of the kind of woofy, unusable low end on an acoustic. They really sound great. I can't recommend these enough. Next question isn't music related, but it is very important. The Handsome Wall Raven asks, what kinds of horror movies are your favorite? I love horror movies, and I can't even really say that I have a personal favorite genre per se. To me, horror movies are kind of like pizza, where even when it sucks, it's still pretty awesome. But if I was to name off some of my favorites, I would say The Shining is in my number 1 spot, but I also love all kinds of other horror flicks too. I really love Suspiria, I love The Burning, the original Halloween, the original Nightmare on Elm Street, The House of the Devil, The Witch. Those are some of the ones that are coming to mind first for me. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, is incredible. So I would say those are some of my favorites overall. And speaking of horror movies, did you guys know that Uncle Ben here has a horror movie podcast that you can listen to? Me and my buddy Steve out there on the West Coast get together over Skype and review some of our favorite horror movies from all different decades of stuff. The name of the show is Dead and Lovely. You can find us on SoundCloud and on iTunes completely for free. Go in there and give us a listen, and if you like what you hear, be sure to go on iTunes and rate and review the podcast. That would really help us out a ton. Also, if you're a horror fan like me, I've got to put out a plug to my other favorite horror movie review podcast. It's a show called Say You Love Satan, and all that they do is review 80s horror movies. A little bit of 70s stuff too, but mostly 80s horror movies. It's my favorite. I love that show, so be sure to go and check out Say You Love Satan as well. Tell them Uncle Ben sent you. This next question is a really good one. Instagram user TomBamBV asks, should you practice scale shapes? I would say that the short answer to that is yes. Knowing scale shapes is really important, and especially if you can visualize a scale shape going across the fretboard, that's really going to help you out when it's like mega shred time and you're just, burning, playing super fast and relying completely on muscle memory. Scale patterns do come in handy then. But I will counter my own argument there and say that if you only learn scales as patterns, that's going to really be detrimental and hold you back in the long run from really understanding scales and harmony and all that kind of stuff. The typical journey that most guitar players go through whenever they learn scales is if they're learning like something like, let's say, an A minor scale, they learn it as a pattern. And they can play that pattern, they can play it up and down and stuff really well. But the minute they start trying to explore outside of that, if they don't understand the scale itself in terms of what notes it is, what intervals it is, you can get lost. It's like you get far enough away from the pattern and it's like, I can't see my house from here, you know what I'm saying? You can't really see how that connects to that pattern that you spent so much time learning. So you get out of the pattern and you go, you freak out, because if you don't understand what's actually happening inside of that scale, you can never break out of that pattern that you learned. Try to find as many different ways to play the same scale as humanly possible. For these examples, I'm going to be using the A minor scale because this is a really simple scale. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. It's just the musical alphabet, all natural notes, A through G. So that way it's really easy to keep track of. If you land on a sharp or a flat, you fucked up. So the typical way that most guitar players learn that scale is to learn a pattern like this, starting from the low E string 5, 7, 8, A string 5, 7, 8, D string 5, 7, G string 4, 5, 7, B string 5, 6, 8, high E string 5, 7, 8. That's kind of the typical first A minor scale that most people learn. But what I would tell somebody who's looking to expand their scale vocabulary is to not just learn it as 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, and all that kind of jazz. Learn it for what it is. The scale goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, right? Start thinking about how many other different ways you could say that same thing. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. A good idea would even be to sit down with a chart of the notes of the fingerboard right in front of you and try to figure out how many different paths you could take through the musical alphabet, whether that means A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, or A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, or whatever. Try to find as many different combinations as possible. Here's a really good exercise for you. Play through the A minor scale. Again, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, right? Typically that scale pattern, traditionally has you start off with your first finger and go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, and so on. Do the same thing, but start with a different finger. So in other words, instead of starting with your first finger on A, try something as simple as starting with your fourth finger on A. Now I'm not in this turf anymore. I'm kind of down here in this lower turf, right? Try to find a way to play the same thing, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Again, that's the same thing as A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, but you fingered it completely different. And hopefully learned a new way to travel across the strings if you're paying close attention. You could do the same thing starting with your second finger. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. There's another new fingering for that right there too. And honestly, probably even more important than being able to play the notes of a scale and play them across the neck, it's even more important to understand the intervals, as far as like how that minor scale is a 1, a 2, a flat 3, a 4, a 5, a flat 6, a flat 7, and a 1. And understanding how to play those individual intervals. That's kind of another conversation entirely, but I really do think that understanding intervals, knowing how to play those interval shapes on the fretboard, is really the key to understanding everything. But the note names and stuff, that's a good start because you probably need to work on learning those note names better anyway. Here's one more non-music related question. YouTube user Trey16 asks, what's your favorite kind of beer? You seem like an IPA guy. So I'll be honest with you, I just got into the IPA thing. I spent a couple of years there totally hating them. All my buddies were all about it, but every time I drink it, I'd be like, this tastes like skunk piss. I just couldn't get into it. But I think because I drank the same old kinds of ales and lagers and all that kind of thing for years, over the past couple months, the IPA thing has gotten really good to me. I think initially just because it was something different, and now that I've started kind of exploring all the different ones I found, I really dig them. A couple of weeks ago, my buddy Eric Hill from Blue Room Recording Studios sent me a whole box of West Coast IPAs from out there in California, and they pretty much blew my mind. He sent me a Berryessa Brewing Double Tap IPA. That was one of the best beers I've ever had in my life. He sent me a Vengeful Barbarian, which was unreal. Henhouse Illuminati, which was phenomenal. He sent me a Pliny the Elder, which I'd heard a lot about. I actually found it to be kind of disappointing. It was really good, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like as good as what all the hype said. But those West Coast IPAs are just unreal. They're the best. I also really get into those Belgian beers. Trappist Roker for 10 is maybe my all-time favorite beer. I really love that. I've also had the West Blederen, which is incredible. On that first episode of FAQ, I talked about starting up a separate cooking channel for you guys here where I do recipes and stuff like that. I'm kind of thinking too about doing some beer reviews on there. You guys think that would be a good idea? I think it'd be cool. Well, there you go, guys. Another episode of FAQ. If there's any questions you would like to hear me answer, whether they be about things about playing the guitar or learning the instrument or theory or opinions on bands or food stuff or movie stuff or video game stuff, whatever it is that you want to hear me answer, please drop me a comment below and I will address that in a later episode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and a huge thank you goes to those of you guys who asked some questions for me to answer. That's what keeps this series going, so please continue to do that. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Ben Eller Guitars. Go like my Facebook fan page on facebook.com/Uncle Ben Eller. And if you'd like to talk about booking some one-on-one Skype lessons with me, you can hit me up at benellerguitars@gmail.com. Stay tuned for another episode of FAQ next month. Cheers, guys.